Tonight, disturbing details of a late billionaire businessman's alleged sex crimes. A Canadian accuser breaks her silence.
He was very persistent, very aggressive.
Former Harrods owner Mohammed Al-Fayed labeled a monster.
If I were in charge of the RCMP, I certainly would launch a criminal investigation.
Bounties under the microscope over hundreds of missing firearms. Plus, the Senators score their dream home.
I have a right to a place to live. I have a right to survive.
Eviction anxiety hits a Calgary motorhome community. And a Canadian city stars in Jeopardy.
What is Greenpeace? That's correct.
The category that put the West Coast on the podium.
Vancouver's Rogers Arena is the home ice of this team.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Good evening. We are hearing tonight about a culture of abuse, humiliation, and manipulation under the former Harrods owner Mohammed Al-Fayed. Lawyers in Britain representing the alleged victims painted a disturbing picture today of what their clients say they faced while working for the luxury department store. Among the 37 women who have so far come forward, a Canadian. She spoke with CTV's Judy Trin in London.
It was a dream. It was a dream come true.
Amy had just graduated from Trent University in 1993 when she was hired at Harrods to sell designer purses. The dream turned into a nightmare after she caught the attention of Mohammed Al-Fayed.
Absolutely, yes.
Amy told reporters that after she was promoted to work in his private office, she was taken on a business trip to Paris. That's when her boss wandered into her room with only a towel on.
And he proceeded to get into this bed and on top of me and assault me with clear intent of raping me without any doubt in my mind. He was very persistent, very aggressive. And I had a moment and something came to me and I just said, if my mother only knew. And that stopped him.
Amy is one of 37 women who have come forward so far to British lawyers and claim they have been sexually abused by the Egyptian billionaire. He owned and operated Harrods for 25 years.
He was a monster enabled by a system that pervaded Harrods.
In 2009, Al-Fayed was investigated for allegedly assaulting a 15-year-old, but charges were never laid. The man who rubbed shoulders with royalty died last year, but lawyers say the victims, who were young women hired from across Europe, the U.S., and Canada, can still get some justice.
Al-Fayed was determined to silence these women. They will be silenced no more.
Amy felt isolated and blamed herself for years. Today, she was in a room with more than 24 survivors, no longer alone.
Being together with the other women is empowering.
Al-Fayed sold the department store to Qatari investors in 2010. The new owners say they didn't know about the extent of the abuse until last year. Harrods has apologized to the victims and says that they are willing to settle claims as quickly as possible. Judy Trin, CTV News, London.
At least 12 people were killed in a series of targeted airstrikes inside Lebanon. A number officials believe will continue to rise. Israel says it took out roughly 100 loaded rocket launchers and killed several top Hezbollah commanders, all as the region appears to be shifting towards a wider war. CTV's Heather Wright reports.
Israel hit multiple targets in Lebanon overnight and early this morning, including this residential building in Beirut. It was here officials say that Ibrahim Akil was killed, the head of Hezbollah's military operations. The strike killed at least a dozen people and injured dozens more, according to Lebanon's Ministry of Health. Israel says 10 of the dead are senior Hezbollah commanders, who Akil was meeting with at the time of the blast.
It is clear now that there is a change in the strategy. This is now an open conflict against Hezbollah and southern Lebanon.
These strikes are the latest escalation in this ongoing conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, the Iran-backed militants that control much of southern Lebanon. Earlier this week, hundreds of pagers and walkie-talkies were detonated, an attack targeting Hezbollah operatives that Lebanon's Minister of Health has called a war crime. While it was a blow to Hezbollah's communication network, it didn't prevent the group from launching rockets into Israel this morning. Dozens of towns along the Israel-Lebanon border have been evacuated for almost a year due to near-daily rocket attacks from Hezbollah. Recently, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to get people back into their homes. Some analysts believe that could mean a ground offensive into Lebanon may be in the works.
If their stated aim is to get people back into northern Israel and to allow them to live in some degree of security, then they would definitely need to go in.
Today, Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly said the government believes there are roughly 45,000 Canadians in Lebanon. For months, they have been urged to leave the country while they can. Ottawa warning there is no guarantee they'll be evacuated from the country if the situation deteriorates further. Heather Wright, CTV News, Toronto.
A 24-year-old man is in custody tonight after an alleged knife attack at a mosque in the Montreal area. Police were called in after a man acting suspicious got into an altercation during afternoon prayers. He allegedly pulled out a knife and wounded 3 people. All the injured suffered cuts to their bodies. One was taken to hospital. Police say the suspect's motive is unknown. The country's largest school board is apologizing after students on a field trip ended up taking part in a rally where pro-Palestinian slogans were shouted.
I've had lots of parents reach out to me saying, I had no idea that this was going to be a protest and a rally and a march, and I'm very upset because I would have not let my kid go.
Students from the Toronto District School Board were on a field trip aimed at educating them about the plight of a Northern Ontario First Nation. But parents say they feel misled about how the field trip was presented. The school board says it wasn't aware students would be engaging with issues outside the main Indigenous focus. The field trip policy is now under review. Ukraine is receiving support to help its decimated infrastructure as the country heads into another winter of war with Russia. The European Union is pledging up to $39 billion as part of a loan package organized by G7 nations. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the money will be used to help boost Ukraine's heating capacity as winter approaches. About half of Ukraine's energy infrastructure has been destroyed by Russian attacks. Machine guns are among the more than 200 firearms lost by the RCMP in the last 4 years. The new data revealed through an access to information request. The force is saying very little about what's missing and who is being held responsible. CTV's Kamal Karamali is following the story for us. And Kamal, just how many guns are we talking about?
Heather, the RCMP has lost more than 200 firearms since 2020. And that includes more than 120 handguns, more than 50 shotguns, 23 rifles, 3 submachine guns, and 2 machine guns reported lost from RCMP detachments across the country in the last 4 years.
If I were in charge of the RCMP, I certainly would launch a criminal investigation on every single one of those missing firearms.
The RCMP saying very little in response, only telling us it cannot determine specifically if a firearm was lost by a service member. Also not known is if the firearms were ever recovered.
And Kamal, turning to a different gun story, the federal government's buyback program seems to be coming up short.
Heather, Ottawa has spent tens of millions of dollars on the firearm buyback program since 2020 with no results. The program has cost taxpayers more than $67 million since it was announced more than 4 years ago, but so far it's resulted in 0 guns collected. It was back in May of 2020, the Liberals banned more than 1,500 models of assault-style firearms. It began to work on a compensation program that would buy back those newly banned firearms. Gun owners were given until October of next year to comply with the new law, but many details of the program have yet to be released.
They've spent $67 million in trying to organize how they're going to develop this program. It has not been developed. It has not started. They have not bought back one single gun.
Meanwhile, the government Senate representative called the lack of progress regrettable. It's still not known what the government will compensate gun owners for their weapons. Heather.
Right, Kamal, thank you. A 15-year-old has been arrested following an emergency alert in New Brunswick. RCMP were called to Moncton High School around 1 o'clock for reports of a teen with a firearm. Mounties initially said he had dangerous intent and was traveling in a Dodge Caravan. The teen and 4 others were arrested a few hours later west of Moncton. Parents of an Ontario teenager who died after allegedly consuming the poisonous products of a Mississauga man have launched a civil lawsuit against Kenneth Law. They're also naming a local hospital where they say doctors failed their daughter. CTV's John Woodward reports.
The parents of Yesenia Bedoya Lopez say in a lawsuit the 18-year-old recent high school graduate should never have died. According to materials filed in Newmarket Court sometime in August or September 2022, Yesenia ordered a so-called suicide kit from a company connected to former Mississauga chef Kenneth Law. She died shortly afterwards. The lawsuit says they negligently sold harmful and dangerous chemicals to vulnerable individuals such as Yesenia while they knew or ought to have known that such chemicals would be used to commit suicide. Yesenia, one of 14 deaths in Ontario that has prompted authorities to charge Law with aiding and abetting suicide and first-degree murder. Investigators have previously said they believe Law sent more than 1,200 packages containing poisonous products to as many as 40 countries. Deaths connected to Law's products have been discovered from the U.S. to the U.K. to New Zealand. A count by CTV News shows at least 129 deaths may be connected to those products.
He's fine. He's in custody. It's not pleasant for him, as it isn't for anyone, but he's dealing with it. He's chosen not to exercise his right to bail at this point, and of course that can always be revisited as the proceedings go on.
Law's criminal lawyer hasn't commented on the civil case. Law has said he plans to plead not guilty and that he's not responsible for the products he sells. The lawsuit, a new approach to trying to hold Law accountable.
So it's easier to bring a claim given the lower standard in the civil realm, balance of probabilities versus proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
It also takes issue with the 18-year-old's treatment at South Lake Hospital north of Toronto, saying she attended the emergency room twice but was never admitted, saying doctors there failed to provide proper, reasonable care to prevent Yesenia's loss of life. The hospital not commenting because of patient privacy. The damages the family is seeking are $2 million. Also Friday, a hearing is scheduled into Law's criminal case. He's expected to go to trial next September. John Woodward, CTV News.
A major move for a new hockey hotspot has some fresh legs. After years of speculation, the dream of going to a Senators game in downtown Ottawa is alive again. CTV's Jeremy Sharon breaks down the deal and what role taxpayer dollars will play.
Can't find it. Samson across and a score! More of this, but much closer to this. Today, an agreement between the Ottawa Senators and the National Capital Commission that brings hockey one step closer to downtown Ottawa.
The Senators are doing what's right for the team, and we think that there is great public value in having the Senators downtown.
In 1996, the team dropped the puck for the first time at the Palladium, now known as the Canadian Tire Centre in Canada, where the team has played since. The new deal will see the team make an eventual move from Canada in the city's west end, about 27 kilometers from Parliament Hill, to LeBreton Flats, just 2 kilometers down the road.
It's a different experience when you're attending a hockey game when you're downtown. You tend to get in the area, you go down, maybe meet friends for dinner.
But the road to get here was far from smooth. An initial deal with the team's former owner, agreed to in 2018, fell apart after a legal dispute. For years, fans have been skeptical if a downtown move would ever happen.
The prospect of being able to get out to a game at the end of a workday is really great in a more convenient way.
Is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? So it's we certainly have been waiting and hoping that this would come through.
There is a sense from both sides this time is different, but there are still big questions to be answered, like how the project will be funded and whether taxpayer dollars are expected.
If you look at the history in Canada, public venues, whether arenas or stadiums, have not been funded by the taxpayer, and that would be our expectation going forward as well.
Now, the new arena will sit somewhere right here. It's not clear what it will look like or how much it will cost. The team's president says it's too early to say, but he did clarify today it will be years, not months, before shovels hit the ground. Jeremy Sharon, CTV News, Ottawa.
Coming up, out of room and out of options.
We're not living, we're surviving.
People living in mobile homes on a collision course with the high cost of living. Plus, taking Jeopardy to the streets of Vancouver. Police have made an arrest in a shocking car theft outside Toronto that was caught on camera. 18-year-old Sarah Badshaw turned herself into police 2 days after this footage was released. It shows a woman who wants to look at a Porsche for sale, but when the suspect suddenly reversed, the car's owner was run over and injured. Badshaw faces multiple charges, including theft of a motor vehicle. As the cost of living rises, Canadians are forced to make tough choices, some turning to mobile homes. But the problem is finding a place to park long term. Those in a Calgary neighborhood are now worried for their survival. CTV's Kathy Lee has more.
They're hard to miss on this stretch of road in Calgary. Once symbols of adventure, now homes for those priced out of the rental market.
I'm on CPPD. I make a maximum of $800 a month. Other people are on AISH making $1,800 a month and they still can't afford an apartment.
So these trailers are a lifeline, but their stability and safety for residents have been threatened after the parking authority announced plans to put up no parking signs on the street that some have lived on for years.
There's no reason for us to be evicted.
That eviction averted for now. The city is looking for a solution for the group of 9 before winter comes.
There's only one RV park in the entire city. It costs $1,200 to $1,500 a month to park in it.
Maybe we can look at providing them with a location where the fee is structured to what their financial capabilities are.
Finances, a struggle for many Canadians. In a unanimous vote this week, Parliament declared the country is in a housing crisis.
This is decades in the making, and it's a result of policy across all 3 levels of government.
Even though we're starting to see inflation ease a little bit, we've got a lot to catch up from. So that housing crisis is not going to change going forward.
Going forward, as housing supply gradually ramps up, experts say increasing the numbers is not enough.
We have to think about what kind of supply. We need a healthy housing spectrum to be able to get ourselves out of this crisis.
A crisis that's especially hardest on the vulnerable.
We're not living, we're surviving.
Surviving and navigating their days with grit and grace. Kathy Lee, CTV News, Calgary.
Still ahead, the climate crisis for coffee.
Today I spent $8 on a small cup of coffee. It was worth it. It got me through my paperwork that I needed to do.
Climate upheaval pushes the price of beans to the boiling point. Your cup of coffee is likely to get more expensive. The world's 2 largest producers, Brazil and Vietnam, are facing some of the worst droughts on record. No longer just brewing in the background, extreme weather is already affecting next year's crops. Here's CTV's Alison Bamford on what this means for businesses and consumers.
Coffee habits can be costly. How much would you say you spend on coffee?
About $30 a week, usually about every morning, a large coffee with a donut.
Today I spent $8 on a small cup of coffee.
Was it worth it?
It was worth it. It got me through my paperwork that I needed to do.
And the price of a pick-me-up might be going up even more.
When both of these 2 large coffee producers are having a crisis, then prices in general are going to be driven up.
The effects of unprecedented drought ravaging Brazil and Vietnam, 2 countries that make up half of the world's coffee bean supply. Wildfires decimated Brazilian coffee plantations. I lost 8,000 to 10,000 coffee trees, this producer says. We were expecting a harvest of 500 to 600 bags, but we're going to take in half of that. Similar conditions in Vietnam. The trickle-down effect could hit local coffee shops like this one in the next 8 to 12 months. A customer's daily cup could go up 25 cents, and bags of coffee beans up $1 or $2.
There's definitely fluctuation from one harvest to the next for the producers that our roasters work with.
Experts say large coffee companies have measures in place to limit the damage.
I don't know that it's going to have huge ramifications for consumers. Coffee is a pleasure that people will pay for, even when they can't afford other pleasures.
This does raise a bigger concern about how the world's coffee crops could be hit in the future. Some predictions estimate 50% of the global coffee land could be lost due to climate change. Allison Bamford, CTV News, Regina.
An 11th hour lotto purchase for a retired Quebec teacher has paid off in the millions.
Bonjour, Bernard.
Bernard Morissette took home $40 million on a ticket he almost didn't buy, but he snuck in a last-minute play on the night of the draw. He went online at 9 p.m. and picked the same numbers he always does. The 84-year-old won half of the largest jackpot ever awarded in Canada. The winner of the other half is yet to claim their prize. Wow. Congratulations. After the break, what is Vancouver?
Vancouver's Rogers Arena is the home ice of this team.
The Canadian city gets its own category. Jeopardy is a fan favorite that's all about flexing your knowledge. The classic game show dedicated an entire category to West Coast trivia this week, and contestants fared pretty well. CTV's Andrew Johnson hit the streets to see if people in Vancouver know their facts.
Vancouver, BC, where the mountains meet the ocean and million-dollar mortgages. But how well do you really know it? That was the challenge for 3 Jeopardy contestants this week. No problem for a Greater Toronto teacher.
The first sea voyage by this group set sail from Vancouver in 1971 in protest of nuclear testing in Alaska. What is Greenpeace? That's correct.
We wondered if anyone wants to play in Vancouver today.
I'm terrible at trivia.
Fair, but we did find a few takers.
You got Greenpeace. 2 for 2.
That was the $400 question. The $600? A stumper today on the streets.
George Vancouver was immortalized after exploring the area in this ship, also the name of the longest-serving space shuttle.
Ooh. Yeah, I'm lost on this one.
That's the Discovery.
Okay.
Vancouver for 1,000. The city hosted a famous race in the then British Empire, and these games. John Landy looked back as Roger Bannister passed him.
Commonwealth Games. 4 out of 5. You're the winner so far.
He's the only person we could find who knew that. Everybody's got this one, right?
Vancouver's Rogers Arena is the home ice of this team that joined the NHL in 1970.
Vancouver Canucks.
That's a gimme, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Not if you're visiting from the UK.
Have you heard of the Canucks?
No.
Is it a sweet?
The $800 clue from the Jeopardy episode for you, Heather. In the 1880s, Vancouver was fortuitously chosen as the western terminal of this transportation system, the CPR. I'll need your answer in the form of a question.
What is the Canadian Pacific Railway? Andrew, thank you. And that is our newscast. Thank you for watching. I'll see you again tomorrow.